Somebody shout this morning. Oh yes, I said this morning. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, but this morning moment, right here, right now, has the power to shift your destiny. You see, we serve a God who doesn't need a lifetime to change your life. He doesn't need a whole season to turn things around. Sometimes all he needs is a moment. Just one moment of surrender, of obedience, of breakthrough. You walked in here thinking, it's just another day, but I came to tell somebody, no, to declare to somebody, this morning moment can change your fate. So don't you dare sleep through your miracle. Don't you scroll past your destiny. Because if you lean in, if you reach for it, heaven is ready to collide with your circumstance. Touch your neighbor and say, this morning changes everything. There is something sacred about the moment, something divine about the now. So many people walk through life waiting for the right time, the perfect setup, the stars to align before they move, before they believe, before they act. But I came to tell you that moments birth miracles, and you cannot afford to underestimate the now, because it's not always about the crowd, or the conditions, or the comfort. Sometimes it's about your conviction in the moment you're given. All throughout Scripture, we see that the miraculous rarely gave advance notice. The Red Sea didn't part on a schedule. The walls of Jericho didn't fall during a festival. The woman with the issue of blood didn't get a calendar invite to her healing. No, she saw the moment, she pressed through the crowd, and she touched the hem. And in that moment, her miracle met her. Why? Because she recognized the now. She didn't wait for a formal appointment with Jesus. She didn't wait for a Sunday service or a priest's approval. She acted in the urgency of the now, and God responded. So many of us miss our miracles not because we lack faith, but because we lack focus. We're too busy living in regret about the past or anxiety about the future to recognize the power of the present. But what if I told you that right now, in this very breath, God has already positioned you for a shift? What if your transformation isn't waiting 5 years down the road? It's just waiting for you to wake up to this morning moment. You see, miracles are born in moments, not in months, not in years. And that's a dangerous truth for a generation that's addicted to delays. We love to say, one day I'll change. One day I'll forgive. One day I'll pursue that dream. One day I'll walk away from that toxic situation. But that one day becomes a decade. And suddenly we've spent a lifetime postponing purpose because we were waiting for a perfect moment instead of honoring a present one. God doesn't always show up with warning. He often shows up with windows. And windows don't stay open forever. That's why the Bible says, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. There is a nearness to God in certain moments that demands a response, a stirring, a conviction, a tug on your spirit. That's not just emotion. That's a divine opportunity. And if you dismiss it, if you downplay it, if you ignore it, you may miss what he had prepared to release right then. Think of Moses standing before the burning bush. That was just another day in the wilderness for him. Just another walk with the sheep. But God had appointed a moment, and in that moment, everything changed. He went from shepherd to deliverer, from hiding in exile to standing before Pharaoh, all from one divine encounter to standing before Pharaoh. What if Moses had walked past that bush? What if he had said, "I'll come back later"? What if he had underestimated that moment? And what about David? He was just delivering lunch to his brothers. That's all. He didn't wake up thinking he would defeat a giant. But the moment called, and his courage answered. A miracle was birthed not just for him, but for an entire nation, because he recognized the moment. If he had hesitated, if he had waited for a sword instead of stepping forward with a sling, you don't need to have it all figured out to move. You don't need to have a 5-step plan, a full bank account, or the approval of people. You just need to be aware of the moment. Because when God breathes on a moment, eternity moves. Heaven and earth can shift in a second. One decision, one step, one yes, one act of obedience that can be the spark that lights the fire of transformation. And let me say this, don't judge the moment by how it looks. Sometimes the most powerful moments come disguised in ordinary clothes. That conversation you're tempted to ignore, that prayer you almost didn't pray, that door that seems too small to matter, that nudge in your spirit that feels inconvenient could be the very thing that births your next miracle. God often hides the miraculous in the mundane. Elijah found God not in the wind, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but in a still, small voice. It was quiet, it was simple, but it was God. Some of you are waiting for fireworks when the miracle is whispering. You're waiting for signs and wonders when God is asking you to just listen and respond. That little thing he asked you to do, that small risk, that act of forgiveness, that step into the unknown, that could be your burning bush. That could be your Jordan River. That could be your door to destiny. I want to tell somebody today, don't underestimate what God can do in one moment of obedience. You're not as far from your breakthrough as you think. You're one moment of surrender away, one moment of faith, one moment of boldness, one moment of finally saying, God, I'm ready. That moment can become the birthplace of your miracle. And this isn't about hype, it's about holy awareness. God is not waiting on your perfection, he's waiting on your participation. He's not asking for a resume, he's asking for your yes. And your yes right now, in this morning moment, could rewrite your future. Your yes could deliver generations. Your yes could unleash favor. Your yes could open a gate that no man can shut. Don't miss it. Don't sleep on it. Don't scroll past it. Don't let fear steal it. Don't let delay drown it. This morning moment, the one you're in right now, is not small. It is not insignificant. It's not just another morning. It's a miracle in disguise. And if you'll recognize it, if you'll honor it, if you'll move with it, heaven will move with you. Because moments birth miracles. Don't underestimate the now. There are times in your life when everything changes. Not because of how much you know, not because of who you know, and not because of what you planned, but because your faith met an opportunity. It's not that your fate was set in stone. It's that your faith reached out and grabbed hold of a moment and refused to let go. That's when destiny shifts. That's when doors open. That's when mountains move. That's when what was written gets rewritten. Let me tell you something. Your fate is not final until your faith has spoken. The world may look at your circumstances and count you out. Your past may try to label you. Your fears may try to freeze you. But when your faith gets involved, when you look at what others call impossible and you believe anyway, something shifts. Because God doesn't respond to fear. God doesn't respond to excuses. God responds to faith. It was faith that made Abraham leave everything he knew to go to a land he had never seen. And that act of obedience wasn't just a journey, it was a shift. God changed his name. God changed his future. God changed the future of nations. Why? Because faith met opportunity. The opportunity came as a voice, go. And his faith said yes. That was the collision point. That was the hinge moment. That was where history turned. Opportunity is always showing up, but not everyone has the faith to seize it. That's why two people can stand in front of the same open door, and one walks through and the other walks away. One sees fear, the other sees favor. One sees risk, the other sees reward. What makes the difference? It's not the opportunity, it's the faith. And here's what you need to know. Opportunities don't always look like blessings. Sometimes they come disguised as battlefields. Sometimes they show up in adversity. Sometimes they show up when you're tired, when you're hurting, when you're questioning everything. That's why so many people miss them. They expect the opportunity to be easy, but real opportunity often shows up in uncomfortable moments. And it takes faith to see the divine in the difficulty. Think of Esther. She didn't ask to be queen. She didn't plan to be the one standing between her people and destruction. But there came a moment, an opportunity, and her faith had to decide. If I perish, I perish, she said. That wasn't just courage. That was faith meeting opportunity. And because she stepped into that moment, the fate of an entire nation shifted. Faith isn't just belief, it's boldness in the face of uncertainty. It's stepping into what you can't control, trusting the one. It's saying yes to the unknown because you believe God knows. It's when your heart says, I don't have all the answers, but I know who does. And when that kind of faith collides with an opportunity, get ready, because everything can change. But you've got to be willing to move. Faith is not a feeling, it's a motion. It's not about what stirs you emotionally, it's about what propels you spiritually. Some people feel stirred but stay stuck. They get inspired but never act. They hear the call but keep making excuses. And as long as your faith stays still, your fate stays the same. Let's talk about Peter. The moment he stepped out of the boat, that was a faith meets opportunity moment. The wind was still blowing. The waves were still raging. The storm didn't stop. But he saw Jesus on the water and said, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come. And Jesus said one word, come. That was the opportunity. And Peter's faith said, I'm stepping out. He did what the other disciples wouldn't. He walked on what should have drowned him. Because faith doesn't wait for the storm to end, it walks in the middle of it. What if Peter had waited for the winds to calm before he moved? What if Esther had waited for a safer time? What if Abraham had waited for a map? What if the woman with the issue of blood had waited for a formal appointment with Jesus? So many of us are waiting for ideal conditions. But faith is not about comfort. It's about confidence in God. An opportunity rarely comes dressed in comfort. Your fate may be heavy with the weight of generational curses, personal mistakes, or missed chances, but don't you believe for 1 second that it's locked in. God is not finished writing your story. Your future is not a prison. It's a platform waiting for your faith to rise. And when your faith meets the right opportunity, heaven moves. Sometimes it's just one decision, one step, one act of obedience. That's all it takes. Because while fate is what you were handed, faith is what you hand back to God. And when you give him faith, he gives you access, he gives you favor, he gives you future. Don't miss your moment because you're afraid to move. Don't let fear of failure rob you of the miracle that's trying to meet you. Don't let the noise of the crowd drown out the whisper of God. Don't let a past full of pain convince you that your future can't be full of promise. You were not created to play it safe. You were not called to stay in the boat. You were not chosen just to survive. You were born to shift history. Faith is a divine key, and when it meets opportunity, even if the door is locked, even if the walls are high, even if the odds are stacked, it opens. Mountains don't move when you analyze them. They move when you speak to them. Waters don't part when you wait. They part when you walk. Fate doesn't change when you sit still. It changes when you believe enough to move. This is your moment. This is your window. And it may not look like much on the outside, but something is stirring, something is opening. The atmosphere is shifting. God is giving you an opportunity, and he's waiting to see your faith. Because fate doesn't shift on its own. Fate shifts when faith meets opportunity. Every person comes to a crossroad, a point in time when something spiritual, something divine, something powerful brushes up against their reality and demands a response. And what you do in that moment, how you respond, can either open the floodgates of breakthrough or cause you to miss what heaven had ordained just for you. Your response in the moment determines your breakthrough. Not your background, not your status, not your knowledge, not even your intentions. It's what you do in the moment that moves mountains or keeps them standing still. We've gotten too comfortable treating moments like they don't matter. They do, and whether we like it or not, they do matter to what we're doing here. We've got to be conservative with our time. We've got to be conservative with our time. And what they do in the moment determines how much you learn and how much you stay in the game. The success, like they're disposable, like they'll just come back around again. But some moments only come once. Some windows only open for a season. Some divine instructions are time sensitive, and when the moment shows up, when God interrupts your schedule, disturbs your comfort, and stretches your faith, your breakthrough is not determined by what's available to you, but by how you respond. All throughout the Bible, breakthrough was never passive. It was never accidental. It was always activated, and it was activated through response. God moves in the atmosphere of response. He waits for the stretching, for the pressing, for the faith in action, not just the feeling of belief, but the function of belief. You see, faith isn't just what you believe, it's how you behave when heaven knocks on your door. Let's take the man at the pool of Bethesda. 38 years he waited. 38 years he sat. 38 years, he watched others step into what he was still begging for. And then Jesus comes to him and says, "Do you want to be made whole?" And in that moment right there, his response was the key. He could have kept making excuses. He could have stayed in his narrative of defeat. He could have blamed the system, the crowd, or his limitations. But instead, he responded. And when he responded, Jesus said, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And the breakthrough came. Why? Because he responded when it mattered most. Breakthrough is not always about praying harder or fasting longer. Sometimes it's just about obeying faster. Some of you are praying for doors to open, but when the door cracks, you hesitate. When the opportunity appears, you analyze it to death. When God tells you to move, you ask for another confirmation. But the truth is, hesitation is often the enemy of breakthrough. Delayed obedience is still disobedience. The miracle you're asking God for might already be on the other side of the yes you've been too scared to give. Look at the widow in 1 Kings 17. She had only a handful of flour and a little oil. She was gathering sticks to prepare her last meal and die with her son. And here comes the prophet Elijah, asking her to make him a cake first. Now that moment didn't look like a breakthrough. It looked like an offense. It looked like an inconvenience. But she chose to respond in faith. And because of that response, her jar of flour never ran dry. Her oil never failed. Her breakthrough wasn't in the abundance. It was in the act of obedience in the middle of lack. That's how breakthrough works. It doesn't wait for your situation to make sense. It waits for your spirit to make a move. God doesn't need perfect conditions. He needs willing hearts. The question isn't, will God do it? The question is, will you respond when he says move? Naaman almost missed his breakthrough because the instruction didn't match his expectation. He was told to dip in the Jordan 7 times to be healed of leprosy, and his pride almost kept him from his promise. But eventually, he humbled himself. He responded. He dipped. And the 7th time, he came up clean. That moment of obedience, that moment of right response, was the tipping point. If he had walked away, he would have stayed a leper. But because he chose to respond instead of retreat, he got his breakthrough. I wonder how many of us have talked ourselves out of miracles because we didn't like the packaging of the moment. We prayed for change but resisted when God sent it. We asked for healing but ran from the process. We begged for freedom but clung to the familiar. And the opportunity came. The moment arrived, but we didn't respond. Or we responded with doubt. Or we responded with fear. Or we responded too late. Understand this. The moment is holy. It may come dressed in ordinary clothes, but it carries extraordinary power. That moment when you feel the Spirit nudging you. That moment when something in the Word jumps off the page. That moment when you hear a sermon and you know it's speaking to you. That's not coincidence. That's not emotion. That's invitation. And your response right then and there matters. Do you raise your hand? Do you step forward? Do you forgive? Do you sow? Do you speak? Do you release what God is asking for? Because how you respond in the moment is what determines whether the door stays open or begins to close. Jesus wept over Jerusalem and said, "If you had only known this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes." In other words, you missed your moment. They didn't respond when it was time. They didn't recognize their visitation. And because they failed to respond in time, they forfeited what was intended for them. That's heavy. That's sobering. But it's real. You don't have forever to answer destiny. You don't have unlimited chances to say yes to purpose. Breakthrough requires urgency. When the Spirit says move, you move. When God says let go, you let go. When God says let go, you let go. When He says speak, you speak. When He says give, you give. Don't overthink it. Don't try to control it. Don't ask for 10 more signs. Trust the one who gave you the moment and let your response echo your faith. Even Jesus said to the disciples, "Follow me." He didn't say, "Think about it for a few weeks." He didn't offer them a contract. He gave them a moment, and they dropped their nets and followed. Their response was immediate, and their lives were never the same. This moment you're in right now may feel ordinary, but if you listen with spiritual ears, you'll hear destiny knocking. You'll hear heaven speaking. And what you do right now, not next year, not after you feel ready, right now, could change everything. So don't miss your breakthrough. Don't postpone your miracle. Don't silence your obedience. Respond, step out, trust God, and watch what happens when you align your response with His timing. Because your response in the moment isn't just a reaction, it's the catalyst for breakthrough. It's the bridge between where you are and where God is taking you. Heaven is waiting. Destiny is watching. And everything hinges on one thing: your response. There's something powerful in knowing that God's delay is never His denial. That just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. That just because you haven't seen the promise come to pass doesn't mean the promise is dead. No, my friend, delay is not the enemy. Delay is not a closed door. Delay is often the training ground of faith. Delay is often the training ground of faith. Delay is where God stretches your patience, refines your perspective, and prepares your spirit to carry what He's promised. But while God's delay is not denial, your hesitation can be disobedience. That's where many of us get stuck. We confuse God's timing with our own unwillingness to move. We say we're waiting on God, but the truth is, God's been waiting on us. He gave the instruction. He opened the door. He stirred the conviction. But we hesitated. We lingered. We asked for more confirmation. We tried to make it comfortable, convenient, and logical. And in doing so, we missed the moment that was already ready for us. You can't obey on your own terms and still expect breakthrough. You can't put off purpose and expect peace. There comes a time when what looks like caution is actually rebellion in disguise, because obedience delayed is obedience denied. When God gives you a word, when He drops that thing in your spirit, when He nudges you to move, to speak, to shift, to sow, to let go, to forgive, the time to respond is now. Look at Jonah. God told him to go to Nineveh. Clear instruction, no confusion. But Jonah hesitated. He ran in the opposite direction. He got on a ship, tried to outrun the assignment, and ended up in the belly of a fish. Not because God was punishing him, but because hesitation has consequences. Disobedience may not cancel your calling, but it will delay your journey and detour your path. Jonah still got to Nineveh, but not without unnecessary pain. How many storms have we had to survive, not because of the devil, but because we didn't move when God said move? God's not playing games with destiny. He's patient, yes. He's merciful, absolutely. But he is intentional. When he speaks, he expects a response. When he opens a door, he expects you to walk through it. When he brings the opportunity, he's looking for your yes. And every time you hesitate, you risk missing what he had already prepared for you. Look at the Israelites. They came to the edge of the promised land and God said, go in and take it. But they hesitated. They sent spies instead of sending soldiers. They listened to fear instead of faith. They stalled when they should have stepped. And that hesitation turned into 40 years of wandering. 40 years of delay, not because God changed his mind, but because they didn't move in time. You can miss a divine moment while you're waiting for your comfort zone to catch up. You can lose momentum trying to get consensus from people who were never meant to understand your call. You can abort assignments while praying for confirmations God already gave you. Some of us are asking God to speak again, but he's saying, I haven't changed what I said the first time. Delay is not the issue. God often works through delay. David was anointed king, but didn't wear the crown for years. Joseph had dreams, but spent years in a prison cell. Abraham was promised a child, but waited decades to see it. Delay is often divine because it shapes your character before it delivers your reward. But hesitation? That's on you. That's your flesh getting in the way of your faith. That's your fear trying to manage the move of God. That's your overthinking trying to play the role of the Holy Ghost. We don't have to be perfect to obey. We just have to be willing. God never required flawless execution. He just wanted a heart that says, yes, Lord. Even if it's shaky, even if it's uncertain, even if it doesn't make sense. That kind of faith honors God, and that kind of faith gets honored by God. Let me tell you, the enemy doesn't have to stop you if he can just slow you down. If he can't get you to turn back, he'll settle for keeping you stuck in neutral. Hesitation becomes his strategy. He whispers, wait a little longer. Think it through. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next season. And before you know it, a year has passed. 5 years, 10 years, and the promise feels distant. Not because it's gone, but because you paused when you should have pursued. Sometimes the difference between average and anointed, between surviving and soaring, between potential and purpose, is just speed of obedience. When you move when he speaks, things shift. When you respond quickly, heaven aligns. When you obey without second guessing, favor accelerates. Because God honors immediacy. He honors faith in motion. When Jesus called the disciples, they dropped their nets immediately. They didn't go home and pray about it. They didn't ask their cousins for advice. They responded. And that response launched their destiny. When Jesus passed by blind Bartimaeus, he didn't hesitate. He shouted, "Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd tried to shut him down, but he didn't delay. He pressed, he reached, he cried louder. And because of that urgency, that refusal to hesitate, Jesus stopped and the man's eyes were opened. Your miracle might not be far away. It might not even be hidden. It might just be waiting on your response, waiting on you to move without fear, to trust without full understanding, to obey without delay. That's where the shift happens. That's where heaven meets earth. That's where breakthrough explodes. So hear me when I say this. God is not mad at your delays. But He is calling you out of hesitation. He's calling you into action, into alignment, into purpose. That hesitation you've been labeling as wisdom, sometimes it's just fear dressed up in logic. That overthinking you've been calling discernment, sometimes it's disobedience in disguise. You don't need another sign. You don't need another prophetic word. You don't need another fleece laid out on the ground. You need to move. You need to trust. You need to do the thing God already told you to do, and do it now. Not next week, not after the fear goes away, not after you feel worthy. Now. Because delay is not denial, but hesitation can be disobedience. And disobedience always comes with a cost you don't have to pay if you just say yes. So rise up, shake off the fear, silence the doubt, and step into what God has already prepared. You're not waiting on breakthrough. Breakthrough is waiting on you. Sometimes we are waiting on a massive move from God, expecting thunder and fire, a flash of lightning or an angel from heaven. But God is whispering one thing in the quiet of your spirit. Shift. Just shift. A small shift. Not a new job, not a new church, not a new relationship, not a full relocation. Just a small shift in your mindset. Because the way you think determines the way you move. And the way you move sets the tone for what heaven can release in your life. God doesn't need a storm to change your life. He can use a whisper. He doesn't need to destroy the whole building. He just needs to move one brick. And that brick is often how you think, how you perceive, how you process what you're going through. You don't need a new promise. You need a new perspective. You don't need a new promise. You need a new perspective. You don't need a new promise. You need a new... There are people stuck in the same cycle, walking in the same wilderness, not because God isn't moving, but because their mindset is still chained, still negative, still bound by fear, comparison, trauma, or pride. But one small shift, just one moment of clarity, one breath of revelation, one divine interruption in your thought pattern can break open everything. Because you cannot walk into divine alignment thinking with earthly limitation. The Bible says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That means transformation doesn't start with money. It doesn't start with healing. It doesn't start with relocation. It starts in your mind. How you think about God, how you think about yourself, how you think about your struggle, that's where the real battle is fought. If the enemy can keep you thinking small, thinking broken, thinking like a victim, he can keep you from ever stepping into what God already placed in you. You can't receive kingdom promises with a wilderness mentality. The children of Israel were delivered from Egypt. God had already brought them out, but they still thought like slaves. So when they came up to Canaan, the land that was theirs, they said, we are like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And right there, the promise didn't leave them, but they disqualified themselves from walking into it. Why? Because their mindset couldn't carry their miracle. Let me tell you something powerful. What you see in yourself determines what you can steward from God. If you see yourself as a mistake, as too late, too flawed, too forgotten, then even when God blesses you, you'll mishandle it. Even when He opens the door, you won't walk through it boldly. Even when He speaks, you'll question it, because your mindset has trained you to expect less. But when you shift, when you allow the Holy Spirit to renew your thoughts, suddenly everything begins to align. That small adjustment in your thinking realigns you with heaven. You start expecting God's favor instead of waiting for failure. You start trusting that God is for you and not punishing you. You stop rehearsing trauma and start prophesying truth over your life. That shift opens your spirit to recognize what God has already set up for you. Divine alignment isn't something you force. It's something you flow into. And that flow starts when your thoughts begin to match God's truth. When you stop seeing yourself through the lens of your wounds and start seeing yourself through the lens of your worth in Christ. That's where breakthrough begins. That's where peace enters. That's where your steps start lining up with your destiny. Think about the woman with the issue of blood. For 12 years she had suffered. She had tried everything. Doctors, resources, nothing worked. But then she made a shift in her mind. She said to herself, if I can just touch the hem of His garment, I'll be healed. That was the shift. That wasn't strategy, that was mindset. She thought differently, she believed differently, and that new mindset moved her through the crowd, past the rules, past the shame, past the pain, until she got her miracle. All because she shifted how she thought. How many miracles are we missing because our mindset is still broken? How many open doors have we ignored because our mind was stuck in fear? How many times has God tried to elevate us, but our thoughts kept pulling us down? It's not always the devil blocking you. Sometimes it's your own thoughts that are doing the resisting. God is trying to align your steps with your assignment, but He needs your mind to agree. He needs your thoughts to catch up to the level of your calling. He needs your internal dialogue to reflect what heaven is saying about you. Not what your past told you. Not what trauma whispered. Not what your enemies declared. When your thoughts begin to align with His word, then your path begins to align with His. That's why the enemy fights your mind so hard. That's why he sows seeds of doubt, shame, comparison, and discouragement. Because if he can cloud your mind, he can corrupt your movements. He doesn't have to take your calling, just distract your focus. But when you take authority over your thoughts, when you silence the inner critic and start speaking the word over yourself, something shifts, something aligns. You go from confusion to clarity, from delay to direction, from wandering to walking with purpose. This isn't about hype, it's about alignment. Because once you think right, you start living right. You start making decisions that reflect your destiny, not your dysfunction. You start surrounding yourself with people who feed your faith, not fuel your fear. You start investing your time in what God values. You start saying yes to what used to scare you. Not because the fear is gone, but because your mind is now governed by faith. That's the power of a mindset shift. That's the open door into divine alignment. And that's what heaven is inviting you into right now. You don't have to climb a mountain to get there. You don't have to beg God for another sign. You just need to shift just one new thought, one moment of clarity where you decide to believe what God says about you and let go of every lie that tried to define you. You don't need to be perfect to be aligned. You just need to think like you're chosen, like you're called, like you're already seated in heavenly places with Christ. And when that thought gets rooted in your spirit, it becomes a foundation that hell can't shake. You'll walk into rooms different, you'll pray different, you'll expect different, because now you're thinking like heaven. So today, let this be your moment of shift. Let it be the day you stop waiting for everything around you to change and start transforming what's within you. That one small shift in mindset, that one adjustment can unlock divine alignment. And divine alignment will take you where hustle never could. And so I came here today, not just to speak words, not just to fill the air with inspiration, but to declare a divine interruption, a holy collision between your now and your next. Because this moment, right here, right now, this morning moment can change your fate. You don't have to wait until next year, next month, or even tomorrow. God doesn't need a calendar to bless you. He doesn't need your resume, your bank account, or your followers. He just needs your yes. He just needs your attention. He just needs your heart to wake up and realize that right now is sacred ground. This is not just another Sunday, not just another sunrise, not just another breath. This is a divine setup, a moment that heaven has been orchestrating behind the scenes. Through your pain, through your waiting, through your struggle, to bring you face to face with purpose. To bring you face to face with purpose. You thought this was just a speech, but this is a spiritual shift, a breaking of cycles, a releasing of destiny, a turning point that won't be reversed. You may have come in weary, but you're leaving with a word. You may have felt forgotten, but heaven knows your name. You may have stumbled in shame, but grace just stood you back up. You may have delayed, you may have hesitated, you may have doubted, but the mercy of God said, I'll wait until you wake up. I'll wait until you respond. And now that you're here, now that you feel that fire in your bones, don't you dare ignore this place the same. Don't you dare ignore the nudge. Don't you dare go back to Egypt thinking slavery is safer than the promised land. God didn't wake you up for routine. He woke you up for revival, for realignment, for resurrection. The old is falling off you and the new is rising up in you. This morning moment is your invitation. Will you move when he speaks? Will you shift when he says shift? Will you walk when the door opens, or will you hesitate and forfeit what was already prepared for you? No more delay, no more fear, no more waiting for the perfect conditions. Fate bends where faith begins. And if you can believe, really believe, that one moment can change everything, then this moment is yours. So lift your eyes, square your shoulders, step into it, because this morning moment